question to get us going today. It might be a little bit of an awkward one. We'll see how this goes. Have you ever met someone that you wish you'd never met? Just think back. No elbows. No looking down the line and looking at someone that you wish you'd never met, okay? Have you ever met someone that you wish you had never met? Maybe that's too personal of a question, so let's take it, third person here. Has your husband or wife ever met someone that you wish you had never met? Maybe they're a little too happy that they met that person. Or for your parents out there, have your kids ever met someone that you wish they had never, ever met? There's a very interesting dynamic between relationships that we all experience, and we all have the answer yes to many of those questions. But there's a very interesting relationship between the people we've met and our greatest regret. There's a relationship between those two things. And I don't know what your greatest regret is, but I would probably place some bets that you weren't alone, that you were with a group of people. Our greatest regrets normally involve other people. And what's interesting about other people, especially about the regrets that they involve, is that these people weren't necessarily the people we were hostile with. They weren't necessarily our enemies. They were just people we might have considered friends. But the truth is, you have regrets. The truth is, I have regrets. And most of our regrets had people involved. And those people, more than often, we considered to be friends. That's something to think about. Now, today we're diving into part 2 of our series, Guardrails. And if you were here last week, maybe you left and you were like, hey, so-and-so needs to listen to this message. My husband needs to be here next week because he needs to listen to this series. Today is going to be very tempting to listen to kind of the same filter. It's going to be very tempting, very hard to kind of avoid this, but you're pretty much going to be wanting to listen through the same filter as you go through today. And I want to ask you, just for the next 30 minutes, I just want you to try and step out of that and be able to say, well, perhaps, what is it that I need to do with what I've heard today? Not what my husband, my wife, my friends, Joe needs to do. What do I need to do with what I've heard today? And perhaps if you're a follower of Jesus here today, perhaps, what would God have you do with what you hear today? Now, kind of quick review of what we are. We all know guardrails. We all see guardrails all over the place. But a guardrail essentially is this. It's a system designed to keep vehicles from straying into dangerous or off-limit areas. We said that. We find them all over the roads. And if you've done some driving over the holiday season, you've seen a lot of these all over the place. Maybe 1 or 2 wrecked ones, but you've seen a whole bunch of guardrails around. And guardrails essentially do 2 things. They direct and they protect. They direct us. They also protect us. And one of the things that none of us would argue with is the fact that a guardrail is not in the danger zone. A guardrail is never placed in the danger zone. A guardrail is in fact placed within the safety zone. A guardrail is always just inside the safety zone. And no one argues with this. No one argues, no, I need that extra meter. I just need that extra little space because I want to drive in that little space. I just want to be closer to the danger zone. No one argues with that. When we're driving, we understand the idea of margin for error, right? But no one argues with the idea that the guardrail is in fact placed within the safety zone and not in the danger zone. The other thing about guardrails is that they're designed to minimize damage to your vehicle. If you hit a guardrail, yes, you're probably going to have to take your car to the panel beater, right? For sure, you're probably going to have to go get some scratches and dents taken out of your car, but you won't end up in hospital. The damage that's going to be done to you if there was no guardrail and you went straight through where a guardrail should have been is going to be exponentially worse than had there been a guardrail. A guardrail is designed to be able to minimize damage. Now, the reason we're talking about guardrails and the reason we call this whole series Guardrails and we're talking about this for a couple of weeks is that the highway is not the only place that we need guardrails in our lives. The highway is not the only place that we need guardrails in our lives. Because I know this about you and you know this about me as well, that our greatest regrets may have been avoided if we had had some relational guardrails. Perhaps they may have been avoided if we had had some financial guardrails. Perhaps they would have been avoided had we had some moral guardrails. Perhaps even some professional guardrails. We could have avoided a whole bunch of things in our lives, especially our greatest regret. And remember, our greatest regret normally involves people. That's what we said up front. Normally involves people. But we could have avoided a whole bunch of things had we had some guardrails in our lives. And that's why this is such an important topic. Now, the pushback, as we talked about last week, the pushback for this series is that we live in a culture, we live in a world where we certainly don't like personal rules. We don't certainly like to be able to encourage guardrails. Our culture doesn't encourage guardrails, right? In fact, guardrails are kind of like personal rules, and no one likes rules. You don't like rules. I don't like rules, especially when they're imposed on us. But we live in a culture where the culture that doesn't necessarily encourage guardrails. The other interesting thing about culture is that just like culture doesn't encourage guardrails, culture is content with painted lines just on the side of the road. Just those lines that are pointed or painted just on the side of the road. Culture doesn't encourage guardrails, but at the same time, culture is content with painted lines. The culture comes out and says, well, hey, if you're going to come make a rule like that, why would you do that? And maybe you've experienced this, maybe you've even participated in this, but culture doesn't celebrate guardrails, but at the same time, culture is very quick to mock us and very quick to shame us if our lives end up in a ditch, right? And maybe you've experienced that, or maybe you've participated in that. This is a very, very, very important topic for us to be discussing. And it's a little bit of a weird category because it doesn't necessarily fall into right and wrong. It doesn't fall within that. It kind of falls within the category of wisdom, right? As we had a look at last week, it kind of falls into this category of wisdom, which kind of makes it a little tricky. It's a little kind of all over the place. Maybe it's a little mushy. Maybe it's a little soft. Maybe it's a little bit intangible for some of us. But over the next couple of minutes, I'm hoping that we can talk about one of these guardrails. And today I want to talk specifically about how it relates to our relationships and our friends and our associates. Our friends and our associates. These are the people that you run with. These are the people that you play with. These are the people that you do life with. These are the people that you have all over your life. They've been a part of your life perhaps for a very, very long time. And remember, in all of our lives, our greatest regrets, we've had people involved in those things. That people are generally part of our greatest regret. Now again, as I said up front, today you're going to be tempted to kind of think that, hey, this is for so-and-so. I want you to remember that you need to be able to filter this through what it is for you today. The other thing you're going to be tempted, I'm just going to jump ahead because I need to deal with an issue before we kind of get to the content for today. The temptation for you today is to look at me and go, Morgan, you're being so judgmental. You are being so judgmental. These are my friends. These are my family members. These are people that I've spent my entire life with. These are the people I work with. I run with them. Like I see them every single day. You're being so judgmental. And I want to just say to you, that this is very, very important. I'm not being judgmental. I'm not asking you to be judgmental with your friends. I'm asking you, today is about exercising good judgment. Today is about exercising good judgment, and there's a very big difference between the two. And I just want to touch quickly on the difference between those two things. You see, judgmental really is all about me drawing some conclusions about you. Being judgmental is about me drawing a critical or perhaps a harsh conclusion about what you do, and then I'm expecting you to behave differently. I'm expecting you to act in a certain way or be different. That be different to whatever it might be that you are doing in your life. That's being judgmental, but exercising good judgment is different. Good judgment is all about me. Good judgment is drawing conclusions about ourselves, about myself, based on the wisdom, past, present, and future. That based on my past experience, based on the way, where I grew up, how I was parented, where I went to school, what other things that I'm naturally just tempted to go and do, based on my past experience, based on my present, my current circumstances. Maybe my current circumstances is I've just lost a job, or I'm starting a new job, or we've just broken up, and it's just I'm so mad about whatever that is. Whatever your current circumstances, your past, your current circumstances, and your future hopes and dreams. What is the wise thing? Not for you to do. I'm not judging you. What you want to do is up to you. What is the wise thing for me to do? See, this is all about you. Being judgmental is assuming a whole bunch of things about the other person. In fact, in most cases, it's assuming like a half-baked assumption, making a half-baked assumption about someone, about you. But exercising good judgment is all about me. Now, to kind of attack this from a different angle, to kind of, if I didn't make my point clear there, I want to try and go at it from a different angle. When you were a child, when you were growing up, one of the things you realized is that you are, in fact, an acceptance magnet, by the way, just in case it's just part about naturally being human. You gravitate towards places that you're accepted. And what do your parents do? Maybe you were raised by a mom or a dad, a aunt or uncle, maybe by grandparents. I don't know who raised you. But whoever raised you, whoever you spent the majority of your time with, they were what over your friends? They were paranoid, right? They were paranoid about who you spent time with. And those of you younger may remember some instances. Maybe like your parents, whoever raised you, they would say to you, hey, you can't go over there. You're not allowed to date that person. You're not allowed to date her. I forbid you from going there. And maybe your parents went to an extreme and, you were grounded for a point of time, and apparently this is a thing. They took your door off, right? I haven't done that yet to my girls, but, you've got to do what you've got to do at some point in your life. So I'm I'm ready for that. My screwdriver's in the house. It's ready to go. I probably won't ever do that to my girls, shame. But maybe you experienced this as well in a different way. Maybe you went through life and your parents just one day they said, we're pulling you out of the school. We're putting you in another school. You can't be with those people anymore. We're going to put you in another school. Or you came home one day and they were like, we need to take you out of this environment. We've had enough with you and we've had enough with your friends. And we're moving. We're going to Australia. We're moving. We're just leaving. We have to get you out of this environment in some way. And what was your response in that? Your response was just like every other kid, right? You're being so judgmental. You're being so judgmental. Why would you do this? These are my friends. Why are you judging my friends? And now, many of you are parents, and you are paranoid, right? You're more paranoid than what your parents were. And why? Because you remember who? You remember you. You remember your friends. You remember what you got up to when you were a child, and you become paranoid. And now that you're a parent, you have a very distinct advantage over your parents, probably. One of the things that you have the advantage over is now you can stalk your kids' friends, right? You all know this is true. You all do this. Maybe you even do it with your own friends, like I don't know, the new people that you meet. But by the time you meet your kids' friends, you more than likely know who their parents are, know where they work, you know that there's been a divorce, you know if they've got brothers or sisters, you kind of know that they spend holidays in a certain place. You know a whole bunch about them. Now, is that being judgmental? No. It's just being nosy. Okay? No. You do that because you care, right? You care about the person that God has entrusted into your household, the son or your daughter. You do that because you care. And you know when you come down hard on them and they just kind of they're just kind of going that way again and you kind of just say you ground them or you put them in a certain place, they come back and we've all said this, right? You said this. You said you're so judgmental. And as a parent now, you probably look back and you go, no. I'm just exercising good judgment. I'm exercising good judgment. And the reason you say that, and the reason you know that to be true now, is because you now know what your mom knew back then, or your dad. You knew this, that your friends determine the direction and the quality of your lives. That your friends determine the direction and the quality of our lives. Maybe I can say this a little differently, that the very thing that makes friendships so marvelous, so wonderful, is the very thing that can make friendships so very hazardous. Because what happens when you're around a group of friends? Maybe you've got a whole bunch of things in common, maybe it's at work, maybe you're around a whole bunch of associates, and what happens? You begin to get comfortable, right? And what happens in that moment? You let your guard down, which if you're in the right environment is safe. If you're in the right environment, that's a good thing to be able to do. But if you do that in the wrong environment, it's a very, very hazardous situation that you put yourself in. And that's just the nature of friendships. That's just the nature of who we are and what we do. Now, if you don't believe me that our friends determine the direction and quality of our lives, there's a neuroscientist named Moran Cerf, and he's at the Northwestern University. He's been studying decision-making for over 10 years, and he's discovered a whole bunch of different things. But one of the things that he's discovered is over time, looking at people, specifically looking at two people when they're in each other's companies, is that when they sit next to each other, their brain waves begin to look nearly identical. Then when they come together, that as they sit together, as they just been in each other's company, not doing anything, there's no attitude change before the behavioral things, that there's something in their brain that is in fact lining up. That just being in each other's company, that they begin to line up. In fact, he says it's not physical, it is in fact neurological. This is what he says. He says the more we study engagement, we see time and time again that just being next to certain people actually aligns your brains with them. Now that's pretty scary, right? In fact, you look to your left, look to your right. Right now, you're becoming like the person to your left and to your right. In fact, it just happened right there, and I'll explain to you why. I spoke words out of my mouth. I vibrated the air in the room, right? It went into your brain transferred that vibration into words, and suddenly you were laughing with the people, in fact, laughing with people that you've never met. Your brain waves suddenly lined up. That's pretty scary. He carries on, he says this. If people want to maximize happiness, that's me, and minimize stress, that's me. Don't we all want that? Look at the conclusion he draws here. He says, they should build a life that requires fewer decisions by surrounding themselves with people who embody the traits they prefer. He says it just naturally happens, that if you want this to happen in your life, if you want to maximize happiness, minimize stress, you should be in a position where you can make fewer decisions in life. And that means surrounding yourselves by a group of people who exhibit, maybe they kind of live out the traits that you want to live out in your life. It just naturally happens. One more statement from him. He says, over time, they'll naturally pick up on these desirable attitudes and behaviors. It just happens. You just have to be in their company. But the flip side is true as well. That if you spend enough time with some people, you might pick up some undesirable attitudes and undesirable behaviors as well. Is that being judgmental? No. This is just true. It just happens for each and every one of us. It's maybe for you, your parents, maybe why they didn't let you stay with a group of people, why they didn't want you to be with some friends. It might be why there are people in your life who are in fact pulling away from you, because they understand this principle to be true. Now, over 3,000 years ago, it's very interesting to me, over 3,000 years ago, before we could look in the brain, there was a man who lived named King Solomon. He was Israel's third king. We had we had Saul, then we had David, and David's son Solomon eventually becomes king. And some believe that he was the wisest man who'd ever lived. Some believe he still is going to be the wisest man who will ever live on this earth. But before we could look in the brains, he discovered this exact same thing. He discovered the exact same idea, and he says this. He says, walk with the wise and become wise. He says that just naturally being with a person, you don't have to take a test, you don't have to study, you don't have to go and write an exam, you just have to be with wise people. You just have to be in proximity to those people to be able to become wise. And wisdom, as we looked at last week, wisdom is someone who understands that what happens in my past is somehow connected to my present, which is going to be a predictor of my future, that life is in fact connected, that all around my life, that everything I'm doing is part of one big thing that's moving forward, that life is in fact connected, it's not disconnected. And that if you spend time with wise people, that over time, you are going to become wise. He says that wisdom, in fact, is contagious. That it just naturally happens. It just rubs off on you. So do life with wise people, and you're going to become wise. There's a second part to the statement, and it says for, and some translations, maybe the one you have, or maybe the verse you memorized growing up said but, because it's a contrast. He says, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Now, fool is not a word we use around here a lot. We don't necessarily walk around calling people fools. Maybe you do. I don't know. I don't. But a fool, especially in the Jewish scriptures, a long time ago, the Jewish scriptures, a fool was someone who acted as though life was disconnected. That what I do today has no impact on what is happening tomorrow. That, as Paul said last week, that they walk unwisely. They don't care about where they're walking. They just, move around. Someone who is, in fact, foolish. Well, what's interesting to me about Solomon is what Solomon doesn't say. Let me read it to you again. He says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Okay, Solomon, so if I walk with the wise people, I'm going to become wise, right? Okay, I understand that. I just need to be in proximity to them. That's cool. And you would expect him to then say, well, if you're going to spend time with fools, you're going to become a fool. But he doesn't say that. He says, in fact, it is worse. If you're going to do life with a fool, not only are you going to become a fool, but you're going to eventually suffer harm. That just by being next to or being near people, it's a proximity thing. Just being around the people around you, something's going to happen to you. You're either going to become wise or you're going to end up suffering harm. That if you're in, whatever their life may be doing, if their life goes bad, if you're close enough to them, your life could go bad as well. It's a proximity thing. As they go, you are going to end up going as well. To which you might say, well, I spend time with those people, but I don't do what they do. To which Moran Cerf, the neuroscientist, would say, if you spend enough time with those people, your brainwaves are going to start lining up, and you're going to end up doing exactly what they are doing as well. You're going to experience the shrapnel when they make a bad decision. That's why this is such an important idea. Solomon's essentially saying this. He says that friends who aren't careful with their lives won't be careful with your life. Friends who aren't careful with their lives aren't going to be careful with your life. Friends who are not careful with their health are certainly not going to care about your health. Friends who are not concerned about guarding their marriage or concerned about their marriage, they're not going to care anything about your marriage. Friends who are reckless with their finances, friends who don't take care and guard and save and give, save, and live, and people who don't do that, friends who don't do that, they're not going to be interested in your finances either. Friends who don't care anything about their reputation are certainly not going to care about your reputation. And friends who don't worry about the future, don't care about the future, don't project and want to know what's happening in the future, they're certainly not going to worry about your future. This is why we need relational guardrails. Another way to say this is this: that friends who don't take care of themselves won't take care of yourself. And you know this to be true. Friends who lie and cheat, they feel better when you do what? When you lie and cheat. They feel better when you're doing the same thing that they are doing. That's why I say friendship can be awesome. Friendship can be marvelous. Friendship can be wonderful. But the very same thing that makes friendship so wonderful is actually the thing that can be so very treacherous amongst friendship. That's why in friendship, you and I require some guardrails. Now, just a reminder for everyone, the point of a guardrail is not to, kind of, be in the danger zone so that when we kind of get there, we're already in danger and kind of move back. A nice way to say this is the point of a guardrail is to light up your conscience before we veer into the danger zone. Remember that guardrail, it's not in the danger zone, it's not on the line, the line of safety to danger. It's inside the safety zone. There's a little bit of margin there. And so for the next couple of minutes, what I really want to try and do is I'm going to just give you 5 suggestions. And you don't have to write them down. In fact, I was thinking about this last night. I probably have a story about every single one of these 5 relational guardrails. I have a story about each and every one of them. And so I want to just give you 5 relational guardrails and let you have a look at these. And again, if I could get down on my knees and plead with you and try and beg you to apply these to your lives, I really would. If I thought it would do any help. But one of the things I'd love for you to be able to do this is, again, just put aside that idea that you might be tempted to do, which I think you are going to be, to say, oh, this is better for my kids, or this is better for my grandkids, or this is better for my husband or my wife. I want you to listen to this. I kind of want this to fall over all of us, that we would think about this and we would experience this individually. Because again, the people we've met, they're more than likely going to be involved in our next regret. And if we're able to put in some relational guardrails in our lives, we may be able to avoid our next regret. So here's the first one. You don't have to write this down. If you want to go back and listen to this, some of these are pretty obvious. I won't lie about that. They're pretty obvious. Some of these you've experienced in your life as well, or you know these to be true. Here's the first one. When it dawns on you that your core group isn't moving in the direction you want your life to be moving, that should light up your conscience. Then when you're with a group of people, and they're your friends and they're associates, and you're having a great time, you love the same artists, you love the same food, you love the same music groups and genres, and you guys spend a lot of time together, but when it dawns on you that group is not moving in the direction that you want to move in, that's a red flag. You should be like, I think I need to reconsider what is going on here. And friendships aren't all that bad. Remember, being friends, what happens, you get comfortable, and then your heart gets let down. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that can be a very bad thing. And so when a core group of people, when your core group, when your people are not moving in the direction that you want your life to move in, it's time to reconsider those options. In fact, as I said earlier, if you're a student here today, and you're someone you're still trying to figure out, maybe you're under the age of 30, you're trying to figure it out, and you wonder why there are people leaving you, there are people moving away from you, there are people walking away from you, and you thought they were your friends, I just want to ask you, is there something in your life that perhaps you need to look at because people are walking away because you're not moving in the direction that they want their life to move in as well? That's something to think about. Second one is this. When you catch yourself pretending to be someone other than who you really are, that should light up your conscience. When you're with a group of people and you feel like you need to pretend, you need to put on a face, you need to behave a certain way, that should be a red flag. You should think about that. That should bother you. I just want to say to you, don't settle for friends who force you to pretend to be someone that you're not. Don't choose those friends. Because what's happening, if you're pretending, you're lying to them, and you're not being a good friend to them. But you're also lying to yourself. And if you're lying to yourself, if you lie to yourself long enough, you will become that lie. You're eventually going to become whatever it is that you're pretending to be. And so when it dawns on you, when you're in that moment and you feel like you're having to pretend to be someone that you're not, that should be a relational guardrail. Do you need to stop anything? Do you need to do something about it right now? I have no idea. That's up to you. You need to make a decision, but it should bother you. It should be a red flag that goes off. Third one is this. When you feel pressure when you feel pressure to compromise. Not once you've compromised. Not once you've gone through that guardrail and you're on the other side and you're in the danger zone. That's too late. Maybe if I could say this a different way for you. When something that has never been a temptation for you, when something has never been a temptation, when it suddenly becomes a real live option, that should bother you. That should light up your conscience. That should ding your conscience. You should be thinking about that straight away. And I know for many of you, the tension is you're not thinking about this in regards to your life. You're thinking about this in someone else's life. Come back. I want you to think about how this relates to your life. I think when one of the, maybe you keep going out with a group of friends and they say, oh, you should come. And you're like, no, I'm just going home. And you always go home because that's not a temptation for you. You guys go have a good time. You guys go enjoy that. When suddenly you're driving home and you think, oh, I think I should go. They keep inviting me. Like, it can't be that bad. Like, they go all the time. Maybe I should go as well. When something that has never been a temptation for you suddenly becomes a live option, that should bother you. You should be thinking about that. You should be wondering, what is that? Why is that going? What do you need to do with that? I don't know. You need to figure that out for yourself. Next one is when you catch yourself thinking, I'll go, but I won't participate. I'll go along, but I won't participate. And just something quickly, if I can bring extreme clarity to this. Would you buy that same phrase from your 14-year-old daughter? She says, hey, Dad, we're going to a party. There are going to be a whole bunch of friends. Me and my girlfriends, we're going, and there's going to be some guys there. And I'm sure they're going to get up to something dirty and rough and whatever. I'm just not going to participate in that. What do you say? Yeah, sure, go ahead. It'll be fine. No. You say you've got two options. You either stay at home or I'm coming with you. There's going to be another guy at the party, and it's going to be me. Okay? I'm not saying you can't go, but I'm going to be there, okay? If you wouldn't buy this from your daughter, from your niece, your nephew, from your cousins, if you wouldn't buy this from them, why would you buy this from yourself? Why would you buy this idea from yourself? No, I'm going to go. It's going to be fine. I'm just not going to participate. I'm just not going to participate in those things. That should bother you. You should think about that. You should be, why is that coming up inside of me? The last one is this. When you hope the people you care about don't know your whereabouts. When the people you care about, when you worry of them finding out where you are. And not once you've got there and once there's some things going on and you might not even done anything morally wrong or wrong. You might not have done anything unlawful. You might not have got yourself in any trouble. You might not even have done anything unfaithful. You might not even have stepped over the line, but in your mind, you're beginning what is the nucleus of a lie. And your phone rings and you pick it up and you're thinking about not telling them where you are or who you are with. That should bother you. Because if the people you care about, if you don't want to know who that you're with or where you are, you have no reason to be there in the first place. And I get this because these 5 things, they can sound pretty judgmental, they can sound pretty narrow. And there are only 5 things. I'm sure you can come up with a couple more. But I realize that for many of us, we can sit here and go, well, those things, Morgan, I really don't think you should be telling people that. I think you're just making people scared. I think you should maybe move away from doing those things and tell people a whole bunch of other things. But the reason I'm so adamant about this, the reason I know this to be true is not only I know what has happened in my life, and as I said earlier, I could probably tell you a story about each one of these. But I see, partly because of the job I do and the stories that I hear from people, and partly because of the fact that I know that tomorrow morning there are going to be a whole bunch of people in our communities. There are a whole bunch of, hundreds of thousands of people across our country, maybe, hundreds of people across our city who are going to wake up tomorrow morning. They're going to stumble into the bathroom. They're going to look in the mirror and they're going to wonder. They're going to wonder, how did this happen? They're going to look at who they woke up with and wonder, how did this happen? How did this happen to me? How did I get here? Whose life is this? And the answer to every single one of those questions is exactly the same answer. Is that our friends still determine the direction and the quality of our lives. That our friends, the people we spend time with, they still determine the direction and quality of our lives. It's why you and I need guardrails. It's why we need some personal guardrails. Not once we've gone into the danger zone, once we've crossed that threshold, once we're in trouble. That when we're standing on this side, we bump up against it. That yes, there's some minimal damage as we hit that guardrail, but it lights up our conscience. That suddenly that there's something that's dinging and going, hey, this is a red flag, I should be paying attention to this. That before it gets worse, I can make some corrective measures to be able to get out of whatever it is I'm walking down. That's why you and I need guardrails. Now, Jesus said something about this, which I certainly think punctuates what we're talking about. It's not exactly a very famous Jesus saying. In fact, I don't think many of you might have heard it before unless you've read the New Testament. But I certainly think it should be a famous one. And when Jesus taught, he had this group of people that would walk around with him. And one of their things was they were never going to let Jesus win. And so every time Jesus said something, this group had a counter-argument for whatever Jesus was saying. And so Jesus is walking around and he's teaching, and these people have got a counter-argument. And one day he just says this thing. And it's literally in the middle of like a conversation Jesus is having with people. And he just says it. He just says it right out. And we miss it so often. Jesus says this, that wisdom is proved right by all her children. In other words, time will tell. That over time, the result of our wisdom is going to show. But Jesus also says, and we understand this, that wisdom is certainly not an absolute. Wisdom is not cut and dry. It's not right and wrong. There's no absolute to wisdom. In fact, there's always a counter-argument. In fact, those 5 things that I mentioned earlier, you could go home, you could come sit down with me, you could, maybe if you had some time in the car on the way home today, you'd be able to sit down and go, hey, like Morgan, this is a counter-argument to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you could probably come and tell me those things, and you'd probably win the argument. But wisdom is not an absolute. There's always a counter-argument to whatever it is that you might say. But let me put it to you this way. Wisdom might allow you to win the argument, but you will ultimately lose in life. Because wisdom is not proved right in the courtroom. It's not proved right in the middle of a debate. As Jesus says, it's proved right by all her children. It's proved right by the outcome. And relational guardrails are not a lack of concern for other people or a lack of love for other people, especially when we start distancing ourselves from other people. This is all about you. And if you want to walk away with one thing, I just want you to listen to me right now. This is about your future hopes and dreams. Relational guardrails are about your future finances. It's about your future marriage. It's about your future professional career. Relational guardrails have everything to do with you, not the people around you. Because one day you're going to have to be in a position where those people might actually need you. That when they've gone down the path that they've chosen in their life and they've maybe reaped what they've sown, that they've gone off the rails, they're already in the danger zone, you may need to be in a position where you're able to help those people. That you're able to bring those people back. And again, I was sitting last night thinking about this. I have countless stories about decisions that I've made where I've walked away from groups of people. And it's been hard. It has not been easy. Some of them have been easy because, you pick up on one of those relational guardrails and you can just see, this isn't where I want to be. I have countless stories about me distancing myself from people and being shunned and being mocked and shamed because of whatever it is that I chose in my life. But I'm standing here today at 35 looking at my friends from high school and friends from college as their lives are falling apart. And it's so heartbreaking to watch it. But I'm in a position where I'm able to help those people. Perhaps help those people get back to health or get help back to wherever they may need to be. In fact, when I asked you the question right at the beginning, when I said to you, have you ever met someone you wish you had never met? Some of you went all the way back to high school. Some of you went all the way back to university. Because our greatest regrets always involve people. And some of those people may need you where you are right now. Because Jesus was right. Wisdom is proved right by all the children. Solomon said that you walk with the wise and you will become wise. Paul last week said, be careful how you walk, be careful how you step. Not being unwise, but as wise. Making the most of every day, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are in fact evil. You and I need some relational guardrails in our lives. It's one of the reasons why we at South Point, and we're not just a church that has small groups, we want to be a church of small groups. I recognize that most of you, you're not going to spend your productive hours, that you have during the week with a group of people that you can necessarily choose, right? you kind of get lumped with those people, you get put with those people. And they don't necessarily share the same values that you do, but you spend so much time with them that just as that neuroscientist said, eventually your thoughts, your brainwaves begin to line up. And the reason we have groups and why we feel like groups are so important at South Point is because you have the opportunity to have a counter group, to be surrounded by a group of people who are moving in the same direction that you want to have in your life, that you might end up somewhere where you have. There may be a counter group in your life. And so I want to encourage you, establish some personal guardrails, some relational guardrails as it relates to your friends and your associates. I can guarantee you that you will be glad you did, or you'll wish that you had later in life. And I know, unfortunately, for many of us, you wish you'd had done this a lot earlier. That for some of you, you wish you'd already had some relational guardrails in your life because you wouldn't have so many relational regrets. Let me pray for us. Father God, thanks again for just preserving all of this text, this history that we get to explore as we hear about things that were written 3,000 years ago, things that were written 2,000 years ago. That, Father, that even though they didn't have science, they couldn't look into the brains, they were still understanding the same principles. Heavenly Father, thank you that what your Son came and what he said on this earth, that wisdom is proved right by all its children. Father, that as young adults or as young people, it's so difficult to be able to see what is going to happen in the future. But as a wise adult, as we retire and we move in, it's so easy to look back at our life and go, oh, that's where I messed up. That's where I was wrong. I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. So, Father, I pray for each and every one of us here today. That, Father, whether we are, in our later years, that we might be able to help others find relational guardrails in their lives, that they may be able to avoid future regrets. And Father, for many of us, I pray that today we would filter this through what we need to do so we might avoid our next regret, that we might establish some relational guardrails as it relates to what you would have us do in our lives. Father God, thank you for your Son. Thank you for his love for each and every one of us, that he came to this earth to live just like us and then head to a cross willingly to die for each and every one of our sins. Father God, we love you. We love your Son. It's in his name we pray. Amen.